Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Welcome to this week's episode. I've got a quick question for you. Do you consider yourself to be a creative person? Now, do you? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes. Why? Because you're listening to this podcast, and we're all about creativity, innovation, and design. So I'm going to classify you as being a creative person. So now the next question. How do other people think about you from the standpoint of what characteristics do you exude that they would say make you a creative person? Now, for most, that says something like, oh, he's does great photography work. He has so many patents. He's invented products. He's written so many applications. It's more about the creative output. But that's not what I'm asking. What are the characteristics? What are the qualities that make a person creative? Now, you probably already have a number of these already. And some people may think that these qualities are inherent. You're just born with them. And that's not the case. Qualities that make people creative are things that others can observe, they can model them, they can do them themselves, and they can do it repeatedly, and they can turn them into habit. And it's through this habit then that allows you to take your own creativity up to the next level. So, what we're going to talk about today, in today's episode, are the 12 qualities of a creative person. I've taken a look at creative people that I know, my own life, other people's, and broke out the 12 qualities, the 12 things. And it's not about the output. Those are the qualities, the things that are underneath that actually help you to be more creative. Now, as I said, in most cases, you will already have some of these. But this is about getting you to think broader. Think about the qualities that maybe you're not doing or that you need to put more effort into. And again, you can observe it, you can model it, do it yourself, and then you can repeat it so it becomes habit. So again, today's episode, we are going to talk about the qualities of a creative person. But before we jump into this week's episode, got a favor to ask. Can you like, share, and follow? Can you like today's episode over on the social media platforms or over wherever you're listening to this? Give us a like. Can you share it? Share it to your social media platforms. Let your coworkers know. Post it in your corporate Slack channels. Whatever platforms you're using internally, let other people know about the show and about this episode, particularly if it's an episode that you think someone on your team or within your organization should hear. Also, follow. You can go over onto our websites, which would be like Killer Innovations, or my blog over at philmckinney.com. And up at the top of the website are the icons for all the different social media platforms, and you can click and follow us from there. So, follow us. That's the best way to stay up. So whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, all the places that we post this content each and every week. And so with that, without further ado, let's hop into this week's episode. When you hear someone labeled as a creative person, what qualities would you attribute to that person? The fact that they get defined as being creative. What are those qualities? Now, these could include being thought of as an original thinker, or being able to paint or draw, or being able to come up with great ideas in a brainstorming session. We can boil creativity down to two main points. One, being a creative person, and two, having creative ideas. Creative people are those that can think of new ideas and create ideas that are new, useful. They result in some form of something new, in a process, a a new product, a new service, an innovation. It all starts with the creative person. The creative person comes up with the creative idea. But what is so special about creative people? Creative people often have a sense of creative freedom, experimentation, which surprisingly many other people don't have. For creative people, not feeling creative is a foreign concept. It comes almost natural to some people. They don't know the meaning of creative blocks or creative setbacks. Rather, creative people take their creative genius as just a natural part of who they are. It just becomes something that is with them all the time. This makes creative people creative. This sense of creative freedom, an understanding that creativity is not just about producing creative things, a photograph, a new song, a new podcast, but also about creative in creative ways, such as experimenting with entirely new ideas, trying something that you've never done before. Maybe a painter starts doing photography, or a musician starts writing a book. Whatever that is, it's the creative people we tend to find are those that are willing to try new things. They're willing to be experimenters. Now, in order to be creative, it's not necessary to be born with some divine creative gene. It's not like, you got blessed with it and the person standing next to you did not. In fact, many of the qualities that make creative people creative can be learned and can be developed. And that is what we're going to cover in today's episode. We're going to take a look at the 12 qualities of a creative person. So if you're looking to increase your own creativity, start by developing some of the following qualities. Now, these qualities, as I walk through them, think about how you can practice them, how you can apply them to what you are doing today. So here are the 12 qualities of a creative person. Number 1, curious. Creative people are curious. They're always asking questions and looking for those new ideas. They're not content with the status quo. They want to know what's possible and how they can improve things. Things tend to be a real irritant to them. The curiosity of why isn't that working the way I think it should work? How would I make that better? It's that curiosity. And this curiosity helps them come up with new ideas that lead to innovations. People who are not curious, who don't question the status quo, they're kind of content with the way things are, the way they are. They don't ever push themselves to think differently about maybe trying something different, doing something different. That's not how they're wired. They're not interested in new ideas. They typically are not the early adopters of some of the more recent innovations. They're not interested in different perspectives. They think everybody should be the same. It's almost like a cookie cutter life. They're happy sticking to what they know. So, quality number 1, be curious. Quality number 2, creative confidence. Creative people have creative confidence. Now, creative confidence, what is that? Well, it's the feeling that comes from deep inside when you just know in your gut, in your head, in every cell of your body, that what you are about to do or say or create is something new and original and right for that moment. Creative confidence is not the same thing as self-confidence, because creative people who lack creative confidence may still be self-confident, but they don't trust their creativity enough to let it guide them into uncharted waters. So if you're self-confident, you can be self-confident, but you can lack that creative confidence. That creative confidence that says, I'm going to jump into the deep end of this pool. I have no idea what's going to happen. Creative, confident people are not afraid. They're not afraid to fail because they understand that failure is an unavoidable part of the creative process. They know that creative confidence is like a muscle. The more they use it, the stronger it gets. The more creative confidence you can build up, the more you're willing to step out and try those new things. Characteristic number 3, thick skin. Creative people need to have a thick skin. It's not enough just to be creative. You also need to be tough. You need to be able to take criticism and rejection and unafraid of failure. Creativity, that the process of connecting those dots in your head that comes up with that new great idea. Look, it's a solitary pursuit. You're sitting back, your subconscious is working, as we talked about recently about this subconscious serendipity, the random connections that happen in your head. It's a solitary pursuit, and there's no guarantee of success or fame or fortune. So you can't afford the luxury of being thin-skinned. You need to be resilient. You need to have a can-do attitude. If your creative ideas are constantly shot down, it can be discouraging, and it can also affect your motivation. But if you have thick skin, you will more likely persist in the face of these setbacks. Characteristic number 4, an independent, rebellious streak. Creatives need to have an independent streak. They can't be afraid to blaze their own trail and do things their own way. They need to stand up for their ideas, even if those ideas are not popular. People who want to go with the crowd, who always follow the rules, are typically less creative. They're more comfortable with predictability and routine, and they're less likely to take the risks. They're also less likely to challenge the status quo or think outside the box. They may be happy with their lives, but they're unlikely to make any major breakthroughs or changes. Now, people who are too rebellious, too independent with their creativity, can often be labeled as being difficult to work with. Their creative ideas may not be well thought out or workable, as the creator of the idea may be unwilling to change or adapt. They are so rebellious and so independent, it becomes almost an ego thing for them. It's this stubbornness sets in. And this stubbornness can lead to clashes with authority figures who may not appreciate the underlying creative idea. So a creative person needs to find the right balance between their independent, rebellious streak while also supporting the organization and the team mission. And that's a tough balance. Number 5 characteristic is flexibility. Creative people need to be flexible. Now, the creative process, let's face it, is unpredictable. You never know what might happen. Now, you may come up with an idea that's completely different from anything you've ever done before, going into a new area, and don't hesitate. You need to jump in and figure it out. You won't have all the answers. You need to figure it out. A creative person that's not flexible, they're going to overlook any form of possible new ideas if it gets into an area that makes them a little uncomfortable. And you need to be looking at it in such a way as not, why can't I do that, or why we shouldn't do that, but how do we adapt? How do we change? How do we take advantage of this new idea, this new thing that's coming up? So again, flexibility. Your creativity is the unknown. If you're starting a painting or writing a book and you think you know exactly how it's going to go, the one thing I can guarantee you is it is not going to go the way you planned it. The 6th characteristic is being playful. A creative spirit often reflects itself as playfulness. In order for creativity to be unleashed, it needs an outlet. Being playful is one of those outlets. Having fun, getting a little crazy, a little wacky. Playing around with ideas can help break through the mental blocks by going outside the box so that you come up with new solutions or inventive ways at looking at old ones. People who are not willing to play when it comes to work often struggle to be creative. Look, we've all had these people. You've sat in a brainstorming session and you're throwing out some wacky, crazy ideas, and it's that one person on the team who just is kind of looking at you sideways and kind of makes you feel like, why are you wasting all of our time? That's not professional. That's not business. That's not, we're here to come up with this answer. Playfulness, inject that in. In a recent episode, we talked about humor and the role of humor as a creative thinking tool. Humor, playfulness, all in that same category. It's about unleashing those ideas. Now, in the case of these people who are unwilling to be playful, right? Those people typically view work as serious and often just an absolutely grueling task, which can lead them to see playfulness as really not having a role. Now, this will cause them to put off creative tasks or worse, avoid participating. These are the people who may not want to be part of a brainstorming session. But creative people will know how to be playful. They know how to kind of let their guard down. Don't get so in a business form of don't smile, don't laugh, just be serious all the time. Creativity, if you want to unleash it, you got to find that playful side. Number 7, creative people are more thorough than most others because creative people would never stop at the first idea. So they're thorough. And in fact, this is probably one of those that I see as most prevalent across all the people that I would classify as being creative. One of the things I write about in my book, I've talked about it here on this show, is around not stopping at that first obvious idea. Go beyond the obvious. Thus the title of my book. Go beyond the obvious. Don't stop at that first idea that pops in your head. Go beyond. That's being thorough. Creative people want to see what else they can come up with. Is there a better idea? Is a second, third, fourth, fifth, 25th, 50th, 100th idea to solve this problem? And so they will always take their time. They're not trying to rush things. Now, that could also be a negative for some creative people, where they need to kind of get pushed along in order to continue to move forward. Now, creative people may be creative, but they know that the world is not perfect. And it takes hard work. You've got to be thorough. You got to look at all the corners and look at all the possible areas to make something better, which is why creative people put in all this effort into everything they do. They are extremely thorough. Creative persons also know that there's no such thing as a bad idea. So every good idea should be taken seriously and carefully thought out before making any decisions or any judgments. Don't assume an idea is bad right out of the gate. Think through it. Before you make a decision that you're going to kill an idea or move forward, be thorough. Look at that idea. Understand it. What are the pros and cons? Do an innovation lean canvas. You can go search for that over at Killer Innovations. We talk about the innovation lean canvas. Gives you a great approach to thinking about an idea. Is this an idea you should go forward with? So again, creative people are thorough. Number 8, ambitious. Creatives are ambitiously striving to push the boundaries of what is possible. Creative people, we just have an intrinsic need for self-expression. In fact, I'm amazed, for instance, of how many people in one creative area also express themselves in other creative areas. Software engineers who are musicians, painters who are photographers. In my case, as being an inventor of typically hardware type platforms, doing something like the podcast. The podcast turns into being one of my creative outputs. Now, why do we do this? Why are we ambitious along these things? Well, we crave feedback. We're looking for others to give us feedback on our creative work so we can improve them, we can experiment, and we can use what we learn in one area doing the podcast to applying it to a completely different area. Creative people are creative because they have that desire to create something new and unique. When I started the podcast, it was all about, hey, it's this new thing back in 2005. Nobody knows what a podcast is. Let's go figure this out. Boy, if I'd known 17 years later I'd still be doing the show, I may have thought differently about it. Creative people want to do creative things. We're like anybody else. You get a little burned out doing the same thing all the time, right? So you want to try new things. You want to be ambitious. You want to try it. You want to experiment with it. People who are not creatively ambitious, they just don't have that intrinsic need for self-expression. Maybe they don't want to be out there, putting photographs into a competition or hanging one of their paintings in their living room where all their guests are going to see. They're not looking for that feedback from others for their creative work. Without ambition, creative work will not happen. People who are not creative may still be doing or able to do create things, but those creations will be mediocre at best because it's that feedback loop of how people are responding to whatever it is you're doing. How are you responding to my podcast feeds my ability and my engine to continue to do more episodes of the podcast, as another example. Number 9, energetic. Creative people need creative energy in order to thrive. Look, if you're creative, you're always on the go. You're kind of jacked up. You don't need caffeine in many days, right? A creative person can never just sit still. We'd be bored. Now, boredom is not a bad thing. We just talked about that. Over on my blog, I wrote a blog a couple weeks ago titled I'm Bored, talking about the value of boredom in developing and finding ideas and finding new ideas. So go check that out. But, we're never going to sit still. In fact, we have a hard time being bored when we actually probably should be bored. Well, why? Because we've got these ideas just pouring through our heads. They have to get up. We got to do something with it. It'll be just frustrating to have all these great ideas in our head and we don't do anything with it. So we just can't sit still. We've got that energy. Creative types like painting, making music, writing stories, drawing pictures, anything creative really, because they know it helps us feel better. We don't sit around and just stare. Now, I will watch TV, but even while I'm watching TV, I'm working on ideas. I am working on titles and content for the next episode of the podcast. Working on the latest blog post. I'm working on book 2, as I've shared with you. Right, creative types are always feeding that creative itch. Now, we don't limit our energy to just our creative work, but we're also very energetic about life. We don't, I think in my case, most of the creative people that I know, they're pretty positive people. They're pretty uplifting. I have not run into a lot of people that are highly creative that are also bogged down or negative. And the other is beyond even, one of the things that, most creative people love about creativity is not only just about creating art for ourselves and for our own satisfaction, but it's also about inspiring others with our creativity. Like I've said, one of the things that feeds my creative engine is feedback from you, hearing from you, hearing how some of you gone off and created a podcast after listening to Killer Innovations, and many over the 17 years, I've probably lost track. Hundreds, if not thousands of listeners have gone off to start their own podcasts and ask for help and ask for advice. But inspiring, that feedback loop is what feeds my creative engine. And that also makes creative people, again, enthusiastic and positive people. The next characteristic is number 10, being naive. Creative people are often naive in some ways about their own limitations, but they can also be more creative than others because of this naivete. Naivete means not knowing what you don't know, which for creativity means being open-minded enough to look at something differently and thinking outside the box. Being naive in some cases can be viewed as maybe a slam or a negative. And what I'm describing is being naive is a positive. You don't get bogged down. Not knowing what you don't know prevents you from having those roadblocks or having those things in the back of your head telling you, oh, don't try that, don't do that, someone must have tried it before, whatever. So, again, naivete means not knowing what you don't know, and that is a positive because it keeps you open-minded. It allows you to look at things differently, and it allows you to think outside the box. Now, for those who have been around for a while, will say, oh, you're too naive. While those who haven't will say, oh, you're too creative. This is where the balance between creativity and practicality comes into play, is this naivete. Characteristic number 11, creatives are dreamers. Creative people are sometimes referred to as this term dreamers. This is because creative people thinking involves imagining new possibilities. If you are creative and you're applying creative thinking, you are constantly looking at new possibilities. Some call these creative people dreamers. It's a term that gets attached to many, if not most, and if not all, creatives. And it's this dreaming about what is or what could be or what would the future look like if we were able to invent this, solve this, resolve that. Now, how does the term dreamers come from? Well, it comes from literally dreams. Dreaming about what could be is a key ingredient in creativity because it allows for new ideas and possibilities. Dreaming is that subconscious. You may not even be doing conscious dreaming. And I have never done an episode on conscious dreaming, and maybe this is a prompt I need to do that, to talk about how you can kind of preload your subconscious so that when you go to sleep, that serendipity effect, your subconscious connecting random bits of information to come up and solve either the problem you're dealing with or coming up with a radically new idea. So dreaming is a part. You may not even be aware of it. You may just wake up in the morning and go, wow, I've solved the problem, or wow, I've got this crazy, wacky idea. Where did this come from? It's a key ingredient in creativity. Dreams can inspire us. It gives us new ideas. And as I said before, it helps us solve problems. And number 12, persistence. To be creative, you need to persist. You need to persist in your efforts over time, despite any of the obstacles or difficulties you face along the way. Creative solutions are often found through patience and tenacity. Rather than giving up too early on them when faced with challenges or setbacks because of impatience or frustration. And look, we all get frustrated. I don't want to sugarcoat this. We're going to get frustrated, and you may have to set it aside. Look, I've set aside book 2 for going on 7.5, 8 years. And now I've picked it back up again because I've run into walls. I can't figure out how to structure it. I'm not quite sure the content is working, right? Those are all part of the frustrations of being a creative. You're going to run into those things. So if a creative person gives up at the first sign of difficulty, if we just chuck it out the window or challenge without persisting, then, our creativity will be short-lived because creativity is hard. It's going to take some effort to kind of get beyond the first easy steps. You're not going to come up with a masterpiece that's going to get hung in MoMA in New York the first time out of the gate and in the first 30 minutes, right? Creativity is hard. It's a big lift. The creative process is often filled with Everything from challenges, how's this work? Is this working well for me? Dead ends, setbacks, rejections, negative feedback, all the things that are going to throw these speed bumps and roadblocks in your way. But it's only by persevering through these that creative solutions can be found, that you can innovate and change the world out there somehow with an idea or something that you're working on. You have to persist. Now, one of the things that, when I was going through this list, and whenever I'm working on content, I'm always thinking about, what are the questions that are probably bouncing around in the back of your head. Now, one of the questions that I'm going to guess is bouncing around in the back of your head is we talked about thoroughness and we just talked about persistence. So what's that difference? They kind of sound the same. Aren't thoroughness and persistence really the same? They're not. The difference between thoroughness and persistence is that while persistence is the drive to continue going despite obstacles, thoroughness is the attention to detail and care that is put into making sure that all the bases are covered. So thoroughness and persistence are different, and they're listed here. I put together this 12 qualities of a creative person. I put them in as two separate things. So I wanted to call that out specifically. So let's walk through, again, the 12 qualities of a creative person. Number 1, curious. Got to have curiosity. Number 2, it is creative confidence. You need to have that creative confidence. Number 3, thick skin. Got to have a thick skin. If your ego gets hurt easily, it's tough. Number 4, you need to have that independent, rebellious streak. You need just enough of that, but not too much of it. Number 5, flexibility. You have to be flexible. Number 6, you have to be playful. You have to be willing to play, to uncover new ideas, to kind of break down the walls, the stuffiness of teams and organizations. Inject some playfulness. Number 7, you have to be thorough. You have to look at all the possibilities. You got to pay attention to the detail. Number 8, you need to be ambitious. You're not going to be a high impact creative if you're not ambitious. You have to be ambitious. And it's not a negative. Some people view being ambitious as a negative. It's not a negative. Number 9, energetic. You need that energy. You need to find that creative energy in you. Number 10, be naive. You don't have to be an expert in everything. Being naive is actually a good thing. Number 11, be a dreamer. Dream of the possibilities. Think about what the future could be, what your ideas or the problems that you're trying to solve, how they change your lives and how they change other people's lives. And number 12, persistence. Don't give up. Work it hard, and you never know what might be the result of the idea that you're working on down the line. So have that persistence. Now, the whole purpose of this episode, we've been talking about really, again, these 12 personalities, these characteristics, these qualities of the creative people. Creative people have a creative personality, you could classify. They are creative in their work. They're creative in their thinking. They're creative in the way they live. They just exude creativity. Creative people have a creative mind that is always looking for new ways to think about old problems or to solve difficult problems with new approaches. Now, creativity can be developed by anyone, but it takes time and dedication to develop these qualities into a habit. Qualities we just talked to, you can learn them, you can apply them, but you have to do them. You have to do them so many times, over and over and over again, till they turn into a habit. What's the saying? If you do something for 30 days, it becomes a habit. Some people say 45 days. Commit yourself. Take these qualities and apply them to you and see what happens to your ability to be more creative, to be viewed as being creative by others. So in today's episode, we've covered these 12 qualities of creative people and how they can be applied to help you become more creative in your life or business. So when it comes to creativity, the sky's the limit. So which of the 12 qualities are the ones that, one, you think you're the strongest at? And which ones do you think you need to work on? Now, I can tell you of the 12, there's a number of them that I need to work on. I kind of get a little, maybe a little lazy sometimes. Don't quite have the perseverance, the persistence. I'm probably not as thorough as sometimes I need to be. I kind of looking for the shortcut to move on to the next thing. But today's show's just as much as it's for you, it's also for me, reminding me on those qualities that I need to work on and keep up the habit such that I can keep my level of creativity operating in top peak form. So with that, I want to thank you for taking time out of joining us for today's show. This has been a show that we have been working on for a little bit of time as we sat back and kind of thought about all the qualities and what makes up creative people. And hopefully you found the content beneficial and helpful. We'd love to hear your feedback on it. Drop us a note. You can send me an email at phil@killerinnovations.com. That comes directly to me. And again, I would ask, please let other people know, share, tell people about the show. When we started this podcast back in 2005, we did it in response to Bob Davis, my mentor. When I asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed. He goes, "There's no way you could pay it back. You have to pay it forward." This is my effort to pay it forward, to share with you the experiences and lessons learned over my career as an innovator, an inventor, a technologist, a futurist, author, podcaster, a whole bunch of hats that I've worn, but wanting to share with you my experiences, what worked, what didn't work, my regrets, my successes, and my failures. And hopefully it helps you as you go through your own careers to avoid some of the pitfalls I fell into and to have great success with all of your creativity and all of your innovation efforts. So thanks again for taking the time out of the busy schedule. Really appreciate it. And we will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.